is it. I said, I asked you if I could read it into the record tonight, and I say I haven't done it, but still very excellent.
Ready? Oh, hold on.
5, 4. Okay. It's 6 o'clock on Monday evening, and I would like to call the meeting to order. We have the agendas in front of us. Welcome to town citizens. The first thing we have on the agenda is public input on subjects other than what's on the agenda tonight. Is there any public input? Anybody made for public input on the just general things? Right, here's a truck pulling up. Okay, well, hearing none, we can move on to a public hearing. This is for the Planning and Zoning Commission of Copper Canyon, is listing a public hearing for the purposes of hearing any and all comments regarding 1, amending Article 4, supplementary revisions of Chapter 14 of the Code of Ordinances of the Town of Copper Canyon, Texas, Exhibit A, zoning ordinance, providing for the number of accessory structures on lots less than 2 acres, more than 5 acres, more than 10 acres, providing for the use of a major accessory buildings as habitable space under certain conditions, providing for special exceptions for major accessory buildings under unique circumstances, and providing an allowance for property owners who own 2 contiguous properties to determine acreage for use in accessory building. So does any member of the public have any comments they would like to make at this public hearing? Okay, well, I'm opening the public hearing at 6:02. No one is stepping forward or indicating an interest in making a comment. Therefore, I would like to close the public hearing at 6:04. Okay, so the next thing is we have consent items. There are 3 items. The first is the February 28th minutes of this commission. The second is accepting Commissioner Leibert's resignation from the Copper Canyon Planning and Zoning Commission. We mentioned last time that we regretted her leaving, but we weren't really precise to say we accepted her resignation. So, we can force her to stay on or we can accept her resignation. The good news, though, is that with her leaving, we do approve moving Jeff Dahl from Planning and Zoning Alternate to Planning and Zoning Commissioner. So do I hear a motion to accept the consent items, or anybody who wants to remove a consent item can do that? But
I'll make a motion to accept the consent item.
thank you. Second. And all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Moving on to the real meat of the meeting. The first action item, number 1, is discuss, consider, make recommendation to the Copper Canyon Town Council regarding Williams Ranch preliminary plat, 20.098 acres in the Williams Biles Survey, abstract number 120, Town of Copper Canyon, Denton County, Texas, and all matters incident thereto. In the packet of materials, we had a letter from to Sheila from our town engineer, Chris Hartke, who's here with us tonight. And Chris, you want to introduce your colleague?
With me today is Carson Cohen, who helped to review the plan set with me.
Great, thank you. Welcome, Carson. Hope to see more of you, because we know you really do the work. He takes the credit. This letter states specifically that the engineering firm has reviewed the drawings, of which there's quite a packet in here, but they've all been reviewed and approved before. I think everybody should be aware that the concept plan and the development plan had previously been approved. This is just now the preliminary plat, and they note that they have no further comments for the preliminary plat. There are some discussions here, but those relate to the construction plans, not the preliminary plat. So I would entertain a motion that we recommend to the town council that they accept the preliminary plat as presented.
Can I ask one question?
Certainly.
So, Chris, can you, I'm not a map reader, but can you confirm that these changes are accurately reflected in the maps that council?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So what we actually did for the
I
council.
tried to match up some of them, but.
Yeah, so this is the whole thing. And so what we did is we cherry picked several of the sheets specifically for the P&Z and related to the preliminary plat versus the full construction plans. So those comments that you see aren't necessarily all reflected in your set, but they are in their actual submitted set.
Got it. Any other questions? No? Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion, we accept the preliminary plat, pass it on.
Thank you.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Again.
Third.
Yeah, okay, so we got second, third, and fourth, so I guess that makes it unanimous that we recommend that the town council consider the preliminary plat. The next item, action agenda, is discuss, consider, and make recommendation to Copper Canyon Town Council regarding amending Article 4, supplementary revisions of Chapter 14 of the Code of Ordinances of the Town of Copper Canyon, Texas Exhibit A, zoning ordinance, providing for the number of accessory structures of lots. And I've already read this, so I'm not reading it again. So a couple of preliminary comments. In your package, you have a memo from me dated June 17th. And I guess I wanted to bring some history here. This is not me personally. This is me summarizing the results of several workshops that were done in the town. We did our first workshop on January 25th of last year. And we did our second one, and then I compiled all of that, put it out. We had a second workshop on June 17th where more comments came in, including some from Chase. Thank you very much. And so at that point, this version here is what was done as of June 17th. So we're talking quite a while back. This is now the third version because I wrote an original version and then I wrote another updated version after on March 2nd, and then I wrote another one, as you can see here, on June 17th. So this has been through a lot of digestion. I don't want anybody to think this is me personally this is me summarizing the comments from the town, and they were very well-attended workshops. A couple of other key points that I wanted to make here is that there's my memo, which has some comments in it that refer to other sections of our ordinances. If we and the town council approve what's here, there would have to be some conforming changes to several other sections of the ordinances. They're called out in my memo, but they are not called out in the specific language here. So we would have to work with town secretary and administrator to kind of make sure that everything's all unified. I can discuss those as we go through them and just remind you what they are. So let's see, what tab is this in the book here? Yeah, okay, everything's in the yellow tab, I guess it is. There was no public comment, except we did receive, I did receive, and Chris and Donna also received a copy of a memo from Ted Stranzik. Regrettably, Ted isn't here with us tonight to bring the comments himself, but I did tell him that I did respond to him that I would kind of notice them, not directly, but rather than reading them in the minutes, just kind of go through them. His first comment was there should be some definitions. Obviously, he didn't read my memo because all the definitions are in my memo. His main concern was surrounding the issue of rental properties. And I kind of observed some of this in my memo, but fundamentally the town is a little bit confused, that the ordinance is a little bit confused, a little bit of conflicting information on what rentals are allowed. And I could quote you chapter and verse, but not worth it at this point. There's significant concern in town that there's a risk of people renting their homes on a flip basis, if you will, to Airbnb or the RBO. That's not on our agenda to discuss tonight. It's clearly a big issue. Our town attorney is monitoring this because the state of Texas is looking at regulating this type of service. So it would be inappropriate for us as a town to kind of try and anticipate what the state legislature is going to do, because only a crazy person could do that. So I will just observe a couple of things. First, under our ordinances right now, rental of a home is prohibited. Now, I'm absolutely guarantee you there are many houses that are being owned by someone who isn't living in them. They're renting them to someone else. I personally am not bothered by that. People can buy homes as rental property. Again, that's me personally. This will be up to the town to decide what they want to do, whether they want to continue that prohibition or not. But on top of that is, how the heck would we enforce this? Who would know who's renting their house, and what would we do? We could send Sheila over there with a notice on their door. I don't know. I mean, we don't really have an enforcement as Sheila. Maybe we'll Donna do it if she wants. But we really have no enforcement mechanism here. So that's one issue. There are several other things in our ordinances. For example, renting of single rooms. Yes, you can rent a single room to someone who is not a member of your family, but not that space cannot be more than 1/3 of your square footage. That's number one. And number two, it's got to have the same meter. So several other of our ordinances, and you'll see that in our information tonight, requires a single meter. Did you all get a chance to look into that at all today, or was that still on your agenda to do?
Still in the ordinance, 1 meter property.
1 meter per property. Now, folks with lots of property may have more than 1 meter just as a result of historical. I mean, in full disclosure, I have 2 meters because the house I bought had a shop building that had a separate meter. But again, I'm not using that as a habitable residence, so who cares? But anyway, so that in theory, every property should have a single meter. But again, we've got grandfathered lots of properties here that don't. So again, another discordant item in our ordinances. If we could, I assume everyone's had a chance to read the materials. I want to open this up for discussion. I guess the first item I would like to discuss is a recommendation that if you could go to what I call the grid, which is Exhibit A, and you folks out in the audience may not have this, maybe you do. This is a summary grid that I had put together because I found many of our ordinances are long and wordy and paragraphs and sub-exceptions and whatnot, and they're hard to follow. This was really the only way I could follow everything to get it down on one piece of paper. It's clear, it's simple. I would like to recommend to our town attorney that they include the grid in the ordinance. And we do have a few that are kind of hard to read, but I think this would simplify life for people if they could all see it kind of in a table as opposed to reading and have the paragraphs as well.
And interpreting it.
And yes, it's an interpretation of the verbiage. The first issue that I guess I'd like to have the commission discuss is the first line, less than 2 acres. The recommendation was 2 minor accessory buildings and 1 major accessory building. Fine. But the footnote A is it may not exceed 2,000 square feet. In looking at towns around us, the limits are usually 1,200 square feet for for a major structure on a less than 2 acre lot. 2,000 feet is a pretty big structure. I would like to see what the sense of the committee is whether we can make a change to this document so that footnote A would read not to exceed 1,200 square feet. That would only affect properties of less than 2 acres.
Right. And if I remember when this came up initially, 1.5 ago, 2 years ago, part of what brought it forward was large accessory buildings on small lot sizes that were causing concern for neighbors. So to me, that makes sense to keep it small.
And it makes us more consistent with some of the surrounding towns.
So there's a 50% filter to them, right? So if it's
Yes.
bigger,
Well,
bigger, then it can't be more than 50% of that first floor.
no, well, that's on B. That's on larger than, that's for larger than 2, that's 2 acres and larger. So this is the only limitation on 2 acre smaller lots other than section 4116, which says that on all zonings, all properties, the building and the accessories shall not cover more than 25% of the total lot area. By buildings and accessories, they include foundations. They're talking foundations, not driveways, parking areas, anything like that, or swimming pool decks, just the foundations. 25% of a total lot area. For those of you who don't have it memorized, there are 43,560 square feet per acre. So 25% of that would be 10,890 feet. So for a 1 acre lot to have a 10,890 foot space would be huge. Now granted, I used to live in Dallas, no big deal.
And this is all residential, by the way.
It has nothing to do with commercial. It's residential, and for purposes of this, residential includes agriculture. Right. So, for 2 acres or more, that's 25%. It's pretty big. It's only when you get down to 1 acre lots that, even then, it's very generous. So that's the only other limitation other than this number right here.
Well, I'll just note that on a smaller lot, it's still 1 major and 2 minor, so it is very generous.
Yeah, and it increases, by the way, this is one of the other ordinances we would have to modify is 4-116, which would just need to be conformed with this new section that we're talking about here. So any other thoughts on reducing that to 1,200? Is it the sense of the committee that 1,200 makes sense? Okay. So I'm going to kind of mark that on my master and we'll give it to town secretary to correct. So the only change on this page so far is footnote A is may not exceed 1,200 square feet.
That's still pretty big.
It's still a pretty big building.
For 1 acre.
Yeah, for a 1 acre lot, it would still be kind of lumpy. But
And that's consistent with Bartonville and Argyle.
I understand that's consistent with Bartonville, at least. I don't know about Argyle. Okay, so do I have any other comments on, for example, the grid or anywhere else in the red line version of this document? Which kind of basically, in theory, and I hope if I did it right, the red line matches the grid.
I was just gonna ask you that, so the town attorney will go through and vet that for us.
Yeah.
Make sure the language matches what's in the.
Yeah, one would hope.
Okay.
I'm not guaranteeing. And in theory, the town attorney would also go through and go, wait a minute, this conflicts with section whatever, and he would do the conforming. But frankly, just to belt and suspend here, I think I'll help on the conforming and then let him review it. So did anybody have any other comments on the accessory building proposed changes here in the red line? Oh, I do have one. Yes, I'm sorry, one other thing. Again, Ted Stransik had a comment that I thought was useful. Several that were useful. One that was particularly useful is he said, under the section 4-104D6, which is the septic tank. It's on like the 4th page of the red line. The language here says that the septic, putting accessory building is subject to having the town engineer review the septic. But we don't actually, that was one way it used to be. We now have an OSSF officer. And Sheila, you will tell us that what an OSSF officer is?
OSSF stands for On-Site Sewage Facility Inspector. And so anything these days she's reviewing if it's related, if there are issues with the septic system, if they want to add an accessory building, she reviews it. So, yeah.
So thank you. So the correction here is only to change the words town engineer to town OSSF is administrator or inspector. Okay. So that's just to conform to current practice.
Is that a full-time role?
Contract.
So Chris, you're spared. Just don't have to expect acceptance.
What used to happen before is that we would, TCEQ had to review each application and they weren't as detailed. So now when we have applications for accessory buildings, they go to her and they actually go to Chris too.
So again, Ted had a number of comments here about using accessory buildings as rental property and Airbnb should be prohibited. And again, that's not on our agenda tonight. That's a separate issue for future discussion. once the state of Texas makes up its mind. So other discussion items, any other comments?
I thought in your memo, though, you did recommend us not allowing people to rent accessory building. So don't get condominiums popping up all over.
Well, you know, it's,
Wasn't that in there?
I'm not sure. I have to go back and reread it. It's been a while. But, you know, my thought, after doing this review for specifically focusing on the issue of rental, people are allowed to rent a room in their house.
Right.
So why wouldn't they be allowed to rent out a guest house? It's like, you know, it just seemed kind of, and again, how would we know? And so what we're trying for here is, I think everyone in the room knows, is we're trying for the least hand of government here. Enough. I was joking with Jeff the other day and I said, you know, everybody wants to keep Copper Canyon rural. Well, to me, I'm from Texas. Rural means caliche roads with potholes, droopy fences, neglected horses and cows standing forlornly around because they don't have any feed. Your neighbor has his meth head son living in the trailer with his pack of pit bulls. On the other side of the street is the chicken farm, right? You know, and then your other neighbor likes collecting rusted automobiles and farm inventories. That's rural. We are not rural. We are maybe gentrified rural. You know, Disney rural. I don't. Whatever you want to call it. But it really bugs me when people want to turn the town rural. I go, no, you cannot keep rusted auto parts in your yard.
You got the pump jack next to it.
Oh, the pump jack. Yes, the pump jack. Yes, absolutely. So anyway, I want to be clear that yes, we want to keep our town rural, but not that rural. Okay. So with that said, I don't recall exactly what I said here. I will research that before we send this on. But my personal opinion is if we're going to allow people to rent rooms in their house, we ought to allow them to rent the guest house. So long as, and again, this is up to the future legislature, they don't, you know, flip it every week to some group of college fraternity party guys.
Yeah, I mean, that's been the biggest issue, is just quote, party house rentals.
Party house rentals.
It's not a residential rental.
Yeah, exactly. So again, we need to address that issue, but not tonight. Our town attorney will take care of it once the legislature makes up its mind.
So you'll change this language on page 2 then?
Yes.
Yep. That's right.
Yeah, again, this is one of the conflicts because, as I say,
Right.
there are other places where it does allow.
That's a meeting topic for council.
Yeah, yes. Above our pay grade, as they say. Okay, any other further discussion? Well, hearing none, I guess I'd accept a motion to approve the red line version here and the grid for as subject to the couple of modifications we've discussed here, and send that on to the council for their consideration.
So moved.
Thank you. Second? A second. And all in favor?
Aye.
All right. And I think that's it for the agenda tonight. Any other issues before we adjourn? Hearing none?
I'd like to publicly commend the chairman for working on this. I mean, it's a very detailed document that took a lot of time.
Definitely.
I remember reading it back in June and went, wow, where do you find time to do that?
It was time consuming. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Great job, Mark.
Yeah, and don't forget, this was only one of 3. Remember, I had private roads and flag.
And flag lots.
Flag lots, that's so. Anyway, okay, well, thank you all. We stand adjourned at 6:24. Not a record, but pretty alacrity.
Sheila, do you want these?
Yeah, collect these back. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming.